Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And I'm sorry if you were expecting a video a little bit earlier, but I had some funny things happen to me over the weekend. On a, I don't know if you'd call it a whim or just some kind of a sense of sinister curiosity, I decided to watch for the first time the Captain Marvel movie, and after that I became seriously ill for a couple of days. Those things may or may not be connected. So yeah, that's why I haven't made another video. I didn't, I often make one on the Sundays, but not this time. And I have to say that the Captain Marvel movie was obviously bad, but it wasn't bad in the way I had expected. I thought it would be a remarkably shallow, typical sort of superficial feminist celebration of whatever, triumphalism, I guess you'd say. And as it happened, it actually turned out to be an extremely deep dive into profound themes in academic feminist theory, which I'm kind of surprised that a lot of people haven't touched on yet, right? Because, I mean, the storyline of that movie, and I know that that's not what the topic of today is, but I had to get this off my chest somewhere, so here you guys go. You get to just find out the RPG Pundit's opinions on Captain Marvel, right? The storyline of that movie, or rather the themes in that story, reflect what was like for a long time the fundamental subject of women's studies departments that they had in turn ripped off of Michel Foucault and the postmodernists, which is this idea of epistemological oppression. Okay, and what that means is that things like the Western study of knowledge, logic, reason, structured debate, and generally a reliance on placing ideas and thoughts and reasoned arguments over feelings is a form of oppression, right? This is white nationalism or white supremacy oppressing minorities by expecting them to be rational and logical, right? And by putting a value, by saying it is, that things can actually be real, so if reality can itself be epistemologically oppressive, if it goes against your women's ways of knowing, which can be basically summed up as your feelings, okay? And the movie is a really deep dive into that notion, that idea, which is expressed in Carl Danvers' whole saga of the evil white guy. He's a Cree, but he's still a white guy Cree, tricking her for years into thinking that she had to control her feelings and be rational, and then she only discovers her true nature and true power and her wonderfulness and saves the day when she ends up ignoring reason and logic and following her feelings, right? So it's about the triumph of women's ways of knowing over epistemological oppression, right? Which is just hilarious, really. It's ridiculous, but it's hilarious. It's maybe one of the best attempts ever at trying to make a feminist substitute for the standard models of Western myth and legend. It fails because, of course, there's just not enough there for it to work, right? The message is a really bad message because it says the message of that sort of concept is always you don't have to be better than you are. You're already wonderful, right? And that goes that's a much less appealing message to most human beings because deep down we know we're not that wonderful, right? Men, women, whoever. Then the message that says, no, you're not wonderful and you have to do better, right? That's always going to be the better story. But anyway, Also, I think it's horrible how they screwed up the Skrulls just to be able to, you know, make it into an analogy about Donald Trump oppressing Mexicans or something like that. You know, like, you had this perfectly good space situation with two mighty space empires that were both assholes, and instead, just because, you know, Orange Man bad, oppressing the little green shapeshifters, he, you know, they're turned into refugees. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so getting to the topic at hand. I'm sorry for that lengthy introduction. It has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about in the rest of the video. I'm going to talk about something called failing forward. I by now have scared off anyone who actually likes failing forward as a concept. If you don't know what failing forward is, I'm going to explain in a second. If you do know what it is, and you're still listening to me, you must hate it. Because the type of people that think Captain Marvel is a wonderful woman and epistemological oppression is real are the same sort of people that think fail forward is a really good idea for RPGs. Okay? So this concept of failing forward, it's one of many terms used in RPG design and concepts of play and theory and things like that, is something that you'll see being promoted in one form or another in various games and advice about how to run games by people who are determined to teach you how to play D&D wrong. Failing forward, basically what it means is that the DM should never just say, no, you fail, or no, it doesn't work. And that he should always say something like, no, but, and present you in your failure with some kind of success that you can then move forward with. Right? And sometimes in some versions of this rule, if you want to call it that, there's even a demand that the DM, that even in the dice roll itself, you can't just say, no, you failed, right? So the most extreme version of failing forward would be a game system where when a player character is rolling to hit an opponent, he will always hit unless the player wants him to miss for some reason, right? He will always hit in some way. So he'll either succeed and do a D8 damage or fail and only do 1 point of damage. Or he'll fail but get some kind of a chance to now get a +1 on his next attack or something like that, right? That's an example of the failing forward ideology. And I'm going to tell you now the top 3 reasons why fail forward is a garbage concept in RPGs, okay? Number 3, it's participation trophyism gone mad, right? It's a setup that was made specifically, you know, by millennials and for millennials, right? For that generation. I'm lowering this now that my cat's gone. For that generation who came to believe that they must never be allowed to fail at anything because mommy and daddy never let them fail at anything, right? So you have to protect your precious snowflake players. You can't just say no to them. You can't just say that's a stupid idea. No matter how dumb whatever they're trying to do is, no matter how bad the odds are against them, no matter how high the difficulty number is, you have to give them at least a little ribbon that says, oh, you participated, right? You got something out of it. And that sort of attitude, well, I mean, I put that at number 3, but it could be number 1 in the sense that that's the mentality that is destroying the West. But all right, so that's the obvious reason, is that it just sucks because it does, right? Because it's part of that culture, that disgusting narcissistic culture that we've now created in the postmodern era. Number 2, I guess my introduction was connected to this in certain ways, wasn't it? So number 2. It strips power from the DM. Not only does it strip power from the DM, but in its original conception, the whole idea of failing forward was something that was designed intentionally to strip power from the DM, to remove choice and options from the game master, the dungeon master, whatever. In its earliest incarnation, I don't remember the name of the stupid rule, but it was from a game called Nobilis, the author of which has now changed name and gender, and I don't remember either the previous one or the current one. But the point is that it was a rule that said that the DM, or I believe it was called, there was a name for a really ridiculous name in Nobilis for the DM. Instead of DM, it was something like the the Flower Master or something like that. It's just like you wouldn't believe it. It's something, I can't remember, but it was just something super pretentious and stupid. But they always have to say no but. You know, you never say no. It was the never say no rule, right? And this was set up because it was the idea that players should always get to have more control over the game than the DM. And this is absolutely ass backwards, right? It's the DM has to be the one who can regulate the world, because the players have to be able to incarnate their players. And they can't do that if they're being authors of a story. They have to be people living in that world. Okay? So an RPG is not a story. And that brings us to point number 1. This idea of fail forward, like many of the other flawed ideas in the modern advice to newbie GMs, is something that destroys or defies an immersive world, because it treats RPGs as fiction rather than as simulated reality. An RPG is not fiction. An RPG is a simulated reality. Okay, and there's a very big difference between those two things. A fiction doesn't have to be a coherent world. A simulated reality does. A fiction, you can have, you know, like in many episodes of Game of Thrones, people leave, you know, King's Landing in one scene and be at the wall in the next, and then suddenly be back, you know, half an episode later, back in King's Landing, and you know, having crossed the equivalent of going from Tierra del Fuego up to like the Amazon jungle and back again in what appears to have been like 3 days on horseback, right? So like the just insane amount of distances that makes no sense at all, because it's convenient for the plot, right? And if you're saying, okay, well, that's a story, it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. I mean, it matters a little bit if you want your story to feel credible, but it doesn't matter in the sense that you don't, you still can connect to the story on a thematic level, on the level of plot, as a story, because you're a passive consumer of the story. But in a virtual world, you're the active participant. So you have to be a part of that world. That's what immersion means. It means you immerse, you enter into your character and experience the world of your character. So you can't get to dictate things to the DM, first of all. And that means that you shouldn't live, you know, one of the surest ways that you would realize very quickly that something has gone wrong and that you're in some kind of a fake reality would be if every stupid little thing you thought of doing turned out well, right? Like if you never failed, you would instantly know tomorrow you wake up and from then on you're never failing at things, or even when you fail, something good happens for no reason, no apparent reason, but it happens every single time. Then you'd be like, hang on, something is really freaking wrong here, right? This is not a normal world, right? This is not the world I know. And so the same thing will happen in the virtual world of the game in terms of your ability for you to take seriously playing your character and being a part of your character, right? You have no skin in the game, for starters, because you know that you can never totally fail, right? The logical conclusion of something like fail forward is that, for example, the DM should never be able to kill you without your permission, right? To kill your character. And that just means that there's no risk at all, right? You're playing in the level, you know, not even the newbie level. You're playing the baby level, right? And it also means you're not going to feel any identification with the character you're playing or value for them, because they don't mean anything, because you know that they're just just an avatar of a character for a fiction, right? And that idea of failing forward is itself a literary technique, right? I don't know if they call it the same thing, but it's something that you can do when you're trying to work in writing a story or a plot or a script, to have a way to present, so the hero, the protagonist, tries something, it doesn't work, but he discovers this other thing, and that keeps the plot moving, right? Because otherwise, where would the plot go? Now, the thing is, the appeal for some gamers in failing forward is this idea that, for some DMs, is this idea that, well, what happens if the plot doesn't go forward? What happens if my players all fail at something? Like, first of all, what if they all die? A total party kill. Or second, what if there's some trap or something and they can't open that trap, or defeat that barrier, right? To solve that riddle, and then how do I continue with my storyline? Well, answer number one is you shouldn't have a storyline. You should have a world with multiple events happening on that world, and none of those should be a storyline that you absolutely demand the players go through as if it was a TV show or a novel, right? If your players want to go into the Temple of Elemental Doom and go in there and go through the dungeon, then that's your player's choice, and they can do it, and you should have the resources to get them through it, right? But if they get to a point where they reach a dead end and they don't know how to get around it, you should not magically find a way for them to get around it. They should either figure it out or go off to another direction and do something else, go to some other location. And if that means that because they failed there, some kind of archdemon will rise out of the Temple of Elemental Doom and start to cause great trouble in the kingdoms, well, great. That is an opportunity for you to further develop the campaign. You have to think about the consequences of your players' successes or failures, not try to control whether they succeed or fail, right? Especially not to save them from failing, right? There's nothing wrong with them failing. Even a total party kill in the end of the game, that's just how it goes, right? You can either have them all make up new characters, or you can just say, well, that's the campaign, right? And this is always been a part of how D&D, how RPGs in general are meant to work. And that is the risk of it, the reward of it being that it means you create this intense immersive experience where you are inside the world. It creates a virtual perspective of reality, right? We have, I've always liked the artwork in Cults of Chaos here, because it is, of course, a two-dimensional image, but it has that great invention of the Renaissance, that element of perspective that creates this idea. It looks like you could almost walk right into the painting, and that you could keep going down that alleyway of that medieval Renaissance town if you can just make your way past, the Saint Augustine and the demon there. But this is an immersive experience. The difference between having a flat image of stuff that doesn't seem to have any depth, and the creation of depth. So do you want your games to be deep? Do you want them to just be a dumb story, right, that is shallow and unidimensional, or do you want them to be deep? If you want them to be deep, you cannot have fail forward. Fail forward is a failure of a technique. It's a technique for losers, okay? Take the RPG Pundit's advice on this. If you like this video, please share it, post it anywhere you want, especially if you know that there's people that are going to be interested in hearing it one way or the other. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and click the notification button, that bell, because a lot of times I've had people not realize that I've posted new videos. And again, share it, because I don't think YouTube is going to be doing a great effort to share my videos for me. So I count on you guys for that. If you want to support me, I say this every time, I say if you want to support me, you can, if you want to, support me on Patreon or via PayPal. But you can also purchase my games, my products, like Cults of Chaos or Lion and Dragon, or my RPG Pundit Presents PDF series, which is a weekly PDF product, almost weekly, almost all the time. That every issue, it costs between 99 cents and $4.99, depending on the size of the PDF, and it has like a supplement. Sometimes it's an adventure, sometimes it's a source book, sometimes it's a city guide. There's been lists of items, random tables, all kinds of stuff. This week, for example, we have the Medieval Authentic City Guide to Kingston, a fully fleshed out, researched medieval authentic town as it was in the 15th century, with all of stuff from local legends, including sea monsters and smelly werewolves and other kinds of stuff like that, and the organizations that were involved there, the politics of the town, the law of the town, the areas of the town, all kinds of details, and random encounter tables for events and street encounters. And I think it's like $3.99. So if you want to tip me and get something back, feel free to buy that or any of the other 84 issues of RPG Pundit Presents. Or buy them all, because I'm sure that you're going to find a lot of material in there that will be useful for you in any of your OSR or D&D or other fantasy campaigns. There's stuff ranging from really weird gonzo fantasy, robot generators and high-tech weapons and stuff like that, all the way to really intensely medieval authentic stuff like the City Guide. Though you can still put Kingston into most, kind of fantasy worlds as a you just add some elves or something like that, and it'll probably work. so there you are. I don't know what that says about Hull, but there we are. But I say this every single time, and yet every month I'm getting like a little more Patreon money too, which is really funny. So like I literally in every video say, don't support me on Patreon, buy my products. And I'm really grateful to everybody who's bought my products and everyone who supports me on Patreon. And especially to everybody who's subscribed and shared. Thank you, all of you guys. You're great, and I'm going to keep going with this. And I'm going to try to avoid becoming seriously ill from watching the bad postmodernist Marvel action movies in the future. I'm sorry about that. All right, so we'll see you soon. Currently smoking near a poker plus barking dog.